It was the year my bipolar disorder was at its most aggressive. Two people, claiming to be my biological parents, came to the house. They said I was the real daughter, switched at birth years ago. My mother, crying and trembling, held my hand and said, "You've suffered for 19 years, it's our fault." I looked at the two people, finding it only amusing. A string of comments flashed through my mind. Suffered for 19 years? She's beaten up the principal, punched delinquents, and even snatched the school bully's hair. Even the dogs in school avoid her. If they slow down, they get a kick. I clicked my tongue. It seemed they knew my life story even better than my school records. I let go of the blonde guy I had just knocked unconscious and looked up at the middle-aged couple. Their clothes and demeanor exuded wealth, and their faces were filled with genuine-looking sorrow. But I was different. My mania left me with few emotions, and any sense of empathy had long been thrown to the dogs. There wasn't a ripple in my heart. In fact, I found it funny. I tilted my head and asked coolly, "So you've come to claim me back?" The man, my biological father, took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, we want to take you home. The past 19 years are our mistake, and we will certainly make it up to you. But we also have a daughter at home. She is the biological daughter of your foster parents. They are not well off, so we plan to let Doris stay. What do you think?" My father spoke cautiously, as if afraid I might explode in anger. Another flurry of comments appeared. "What, sister? Isn't that the fake heiress? The real and fake heiresses are about to clash." I raised an eyebrow, a faint smile curving my lips. I didn't read many novels, but I had heard of the real and fake heiress trope. Too bad that I wasn't good at mind games. I only knew how to fight. I wondered how many blows the fake heiress could take. As I pondered whether I should lay a hand on someone else's daughter, the comments jumped out again. "She can't fight. The fake heiress has autism and cries easily. She even gets bullied at school." I was silent for a few seconds. Crying at the drop of a hat was exactly what I hated most, and my interest in the reunion instantly vanished. I turned my back and walked away, declaring sharply, "I'm not going back." But then I thought, if I did go to their house, they would surely transfer me to the same school as the fake heiress. Then no one would dare bully her anymore. I paused, glanced at the luxury car parked behind my biological parents, and smirked. Fine, I'll go. It wasn't because I was soft-hearted, I just hated school violence. Besides, I was bored of beating up the thugs in this neighborhood. I had run out of worthy opponents. My father beamed, opened the trunk, and handed my foster parents a suitcase full of cash. The four of them exchanged polite refusals for a while before my foster parents finally accepted, holding hands and talking endlessly. Being impatient, I rolled down the car window and called out dryly, "Are we leaving or not?" My foster father started, quickly let go of her hand, and chuckled awkwardly. "Let's go, dear. The child is impatient." Sitting in the car, I watched the old street where I had lived for 19 years slide past the window, without a hint of nostalgia. My foster parents had treated me decently, but my bipolar disorder made my emotions ride a chaotic roller coaster. At this moment, I was near my most apathetic low. My parents in the front seat carefully tried to strike up a conversation, asking about my hobbies. I replied lazily, "Nothing special." My mother didn't give up, suggesting, "You must like something like painting, singing, or dancing." I turned my head and said calmly, "I like hitting people." The two immediately fell silent. Good, finally quiet. The car drove for a long time before entering a tranquil, wealthy neighborhood and stopping in front of a luxurious villa. A butler respectfully waited at the door. The villa was huge. If I had to describe it, I would just say it was truly, disgustingly rich. A string of comments appeared in my head. "The opening match is here. Where's the fake heiress? Come out. She's probably hiding in her room, shaking. The female lead is coming home with the aura of a protection fee collector." A maid quickly came to greet us. "Sir, Madam is back. Welcome, Miss Sandra." My mother nodded and instructed, "Call Doris down to meet her sister." The maid looked embarrassed. "We have called, but Doris is still in the art room." The comments popped up again. "See, I told you, too scared to come out. Poor autistic girl." I didn't have any eagerness to meet her, as a wave of sleepiness was washing over me. Seeing this, my mother quickly signaled for the maid, Aunt Alice, to take me up to my room. The bedroom was already prepared, but I hated it. It was entirely pink. When will grown-ups understand that pink isn't always a girl's favorite color? I took a few deep breaths to suppress my irritation. At dinner time, Aunt Alice came up to knock and invite me downstairs. The long dining table was laden with exquisite dishes. My father and mother were already seated, and the spot next to me was empty. 2 minutes later, a frail figure led by Aunt Alice walked down the stairs, the fake heiress Doris. I frowned slightly, thinking, too skinny. Did these two people neglect her? She was as thin as a small cat, so fragile that if I spoke too loudly, she might shatter. This sister was the complete opposite of me. Doris sat down next to me. My father cleared his throat, trying to ease the awkward atmosphere, and said, Doris, this is your sister, Sandra. Doris slightly lowered her head, her long eyelashes cast down, eyes fixed on the plate in front of her as if everything else was irrelevant. My mother gently reminded her, Doris, look, your sister Sandra is home. Doris showed no reaction, seeming to live in her own world. The comments flowed again. I wonder if the female lead will feel ignored and fly into a rage. I was, in fact, getting a little annoyed. This deliberately quiet, cautious atmosphere grated on my nerves, and the nameless mania inside me began to stir. I hated this kind of sticky, complicated situation. I put down my chopsticks. Though the sound was small, in the quiet dining room, even my slightly heavier breathing could echo loudly. My parents immediately looked at me, their eyes were full of caution. I didn't look at them, but turned toward Doris, bringing my finger close, as if to grab her, and asked, Do you react? I moved closer, catching the faint smell of paint and turpentine on Doris. The small girl slightly shrank her shoulders, and just as I thought I'd be ignored again, Doris nodded so lightly it was almost imperceptible. In my head, a flurry of comments erupted. A reaction! She finally paid attention to the female lead. Last time they had guests, she treated them like air. Sure enough, the tyrant aura is strong enough to pierce the shield of autism. My parents exchanged surprised glances. Strangely, the irritation within me lessened somewhat. I picked up my chopsticks again, asking in a normal tone, What are you drawing? But that question seemed to be outside the normal range of Doris's reactions. She fell silent, her eyes vague. My mother quickly intervened. Her voice was soft. Doris likes to draw landscapes and small animals. Your sister is naturally reserved. After dinner, my mouth was still greasy. Meanwhile, Doris ate slowly, taking tiny bites each time, like a small cat, making almost no sound throughout the entire process. As we were almost finished, the excess energy from my bipolar disorder made me unconsciously tap my fingers on the table. The rhythm wasn't loud, but it was fast and dry. Doris froze, slightly tilted her head, and for the first time, her eyes focused clearly on my tapping fingers. I stopped. As soon as I stopped, Doris looked away, her eyes becoming vague again. I continued tapping, intentionally faster this time, observing Doris's reaction, and faintly smirked, thinking, How amusing! It's like teasing a cat. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered through the villa. Reaching the end of the second-floor hallway, I saw a faint strip of light spilling from beneath a door. My feet, for some reason, led me to the art room. I didn't knock, just gently pushed the door open a crack. Doris was sitting with her back to me, intently coloring. In stark contrast to her timid demeanor earlier, she now possessed a quiet yet intense aura, as if the entire world consisted only of her and her painting. On the paper were fields of color so harsh they were almost manic. Yet within the chaos there was a suppressed vitality, struggling to exist. I leaned against the doorframe, watching silently for a while. Suddenly, Dora seemed to sense something. Her brush froze, and she quickly turned her head. As soon as she saw me, a look of panic flashed across her face, quickly turning cold. Doris pressed her lips together and forced out 2 words. Get out. I crossed my arms and didn't reply, but thought, oh, so she can talk. Doris stood up and backed away, her hands clenched into fists, as if suppressing a tremor. Her whole body was rigid, and in the very next breath her eyes were red-rimmed. I mentally woed again. So it was true, someone could start crying from just a single sentence. The legend of the can't-hold-back tears physique was real. The irritation surged in my chest, making me itch with annoyance, but faced with that expression, I still didn't want to strike. I tried to sound flippant, asking, Why are you crying? Letting me see your painting won't cost you an arm and a leg. The comments in my head went wild. The female lead is so gentle now. Before, she would have just kicked them. Right, she should also add, cry your head off to be in character. I sighed, feeling slightly bothered, but looking at her red eyes and trembling wet lashes, the urge to strike that had been building up vanished. Strange, I didn't feel like resorting to violence this time. Doris bit her lip, trying to hold it in, but tears streamed down her face, unstoppable. I took a step closer. Doris remained rooted, tears falling profusely, muttering faint, incomprehensible words. The comments in my head roared, Here it comes! Will the female lead strike? Or will she surrender to that pitiful gaze? I bet a bag of spicy chips, 3, 2, 1. The female lead will yell, Stop crying! But I neither yelled nor struck. My gaze merely swept over the cluttered room, and I plopped down onto a low chair nearby, propping my chin on my hand, and said in an even tone, Keep crying. Let's see how long you can cry for. I crossed my legs, and my fingers began tapping heavily on the edge of the chair in a rhythm. The sound, in the silent art room, was as clear as a drumbeat. Doris's crying suddenly broke. She went quiet, her eyes drawn to my hand, as if compelled. "This trick is amazing," I praised myself with a smile. "A masterstroke." Doris looked as if she'd been struck, completely forgetting how to cry, her face momentarily blank. I smirked and said, "Why stop crying? Continue." Doris moved her lips, but no sound came out. She still looked angry, but her emotions were disconnected, unable to resume. I stopped tapping, and Doris looked confused. I started tapping again, and her eyes focused. I smiled contemptuously, muttering to myself that this sister was exactly like a cat, and a slow-witted one at that. I stood up, no longer bothering with Doris, and walked straight to the easel. Doris immediately became tense, her small shoulders shaking. I still didn't turn around. My voice was flat. "Don't scream. If you cry again, I'll flush all your paint down the toilet." This action was blatant bullying, yet, strangely, it was effective on someone as sensitive as Doris. I could see her stiffen, desperately trying to suppress her tears, as if the slightest sound from me would make her burst into tears right away. I glanced at her indifferently, a small smirk on my lips. It seemed I had found a way to handle this fake heiress. I stood before the easel, gazing at the furious colors. The closer I got, the stronger the feeling of being assaulted. The chaotic colors formed distorted lines like a wild beast trapped, like nerves about to snap. When my mania flared, there was an urge inside me to destroy everything, with nowhere to vent. That feeling was exactly what I saw in the colors on the easel. I deliberately said, "What is this? It's messy." Doris stood behind me. When I turned back to look, she was hunched over, looking pitiful, but a hint of defiance lurked in her eyes. I paused for a second, thinking, autism? She's actually quite interesting. Feeling much better, I returned to my room in a good mood. I even started finding the blindingly pink room a little more tolerable. The next morning at breakfast, I finished my glass of milk and placed it firmly on the table, stating, "I'm going to my new school to complete the enrollment procedures today." My mother quickly interjected, all right, I'll go with you." I stood up and replied, "No need." Walking past Doris, I asked a question. "What class are you in?" The dining room instantly fell silent. My parents stared at me, wide-eyed, while Doris, holding her spoon, froze. I raised an eyebrow and the familiar comment stream popped up. "Do you all think the female lead cares about the fake heiress? No, she's just itching for a fight." I almost laughed. They were right. My mother was about to speak for her when Doris moved her lips slightly and mumbled, "Class number 1?" I walked out the door, leaving behind the astonished, disbelieving faces of my parents. My new school was an aristocratic one, completely different from my previous school. Even the air here smelled of a fake, classic protocol that I found slightly boring. The homeroom teacher led me into the classroom and smiled, saying, "Please introduce yourself." I didn't react much, only noticing a few curious and scrutinizing looks. They probably hadn't been informed of my identity, but I couldn't care less. I liked quiet. I sat at the back of the class. A quick glance showed Doris was also at the back, next to the trash can, a concerning position. I laid my head on the desk and drifted off to sleep. I was jolted awake by laughter. Several boys were chuckling, their voices were full of mockery. "What are you drawing today, mute girl? Show us, show us!" As they spoke, they yanked Doris's backpack and drawing board. Doris was completely rigid, her hands clutching the drawing frame like a lifeline. Her eyes were wide and stubborn, refusing to let go. Behind them, a few girls held up their phones, giggling with malicious eyes. The comments in my head rampaged. "I knew it. The fake heiress probably never has a peaceful day at this school. Here we go, female lead. This is your specialty. Deal with this school bullying." I frowned, thinking, another bunch of trash who enjoys bullying the weak. This is my kind of fun. I sprang up, grabbed the dictionary from my desk without a word, and threw it straight at the head of the boy holding Doris's stuff. The dictionary hit the back of his head with a distinct thud. The boy yelped and spun around, his eyes glaring wildly. I slowly walked over, picked up the book, dusted it off, and asked calmly, "Do you like to sneak up on people so much?" The entire group surrounding Doris froze, shocked that someone dared to step in, especially the new girl who had just arrived this morning. The boy who had been hit clutched his head, veins throbbing in his neck, and screamed, "You dare hit me? Do you know who my father is?" I smirked faintly and shot back, "Why, didn't your mother tell you?" The comment section in my head instantly exploded. "Ha ha ha ha, exactly, ask your mom. The female lead's move is perfect, the god of calm." I shrugged and continued slowly, "Stop shouting, it's annoying." The boy's face turned red with anger and he lunged forward, trying to shove me. I sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it backward. A sickening crack sound followed, and the boy shrieked like a stuck pig. The classroom went dead silent. The boys behind him started to rush in, but I casually reached into my pocket and pulled out a knife. The air froze. Everyone in the class widened their eyes, no one daring to move. I scanned the room and said in an even tone, Anyone else want to try? A few minutes later, the homeroom teacher came rushing in. The bullies were huddled on the floor, clutching their heads, faces white as paper. She gasped, staring at the scene, and yelled, "Who brought a knife to class?" I picked up the knife from the floor, held it up, and asked, "You mean this?" Then, in the very next second, I placed my phone on it and added, "It's my new phone case. Doesn't it look cool, teacher?" In the end, both sides had their parents called. Fortunately, the video clips recorded by the onlookers clearly showed Doris being bullied. The thugs couldn't deny it and were all disciplined. On the way home, my father drove in front. I dozed off with my head down, while Doris silently drew next to me. Arriving home, Doris unexpectedly handed me a piece of drawing paper and quickly ran inside. I held the drawing, momentarily stunned. It was a sketch of me slumped over the desk, showing only half my face and my messy short hair. The lines were simple but captured my essence. Even the lazy sleeping posture exuded a clear "don't mess with me" aura. In the corner of the drawing were two small, painstakingly yet awkwardly written words, "Thank you." I lightly shook the paper and walked inside. My mother came out of the kitchen with a tray of fruit, and seeing the drawing, her eyes widened in surprise. "Doris drew this for you?" I quietly answered yes, and went upstairs to my blindingly pink room. I placed the drawing on the table, thinking, not bad. It's better than yesterday's scribbles. The comment popped up. The supporting character draws the female lead and writes, "Thank you. Is this fake heiress an autistic exterior but a little angel interior?" I held the drawing, about to crumple it and throw it in the trash, but stopped mid-action. This room is hateful enough with all the pink. One more piece of paper won't hurt. I opened a drawer and put the drawing inside. Dinner that evening had a peculiar atmosphere. My parents occasionally looked at me, while Doris quietly ate her small, cat-like portions. The only difference was that Doris's chair was subtly shifted about 5 centimeters closer to mine. The next morning at school, I found my desk covered in drawings and crude messages written in marker. "Get lost, busybody, you violent little girl." I pulled my chair up and sat down, ignoring it. The girl with glasses in front of me secretly handed me a packet of wet wipes and whispered, "Wipe it off." Before I could say anything, a soft voice, like a thread of silk, came from beside me. "It won't wipe clean." I turned my head. I hadn't noticed Doris approach. She was staring at the dirty desktop, her brows furrowed. The comment section immediately buzzed. Oh, the fake heiress is actively making a move." I pushed the wipes back to the girl in front and said, "No need." Then I looked at Doris and told her, "Go back to your seat." But Doris just stood there, her eyes fixed on the vulgar graffiti, the corners of her eyes turning red again. I found it strange. What is there to cry about? Doris took a deep breath, seemingly trying to swallow her tears. During class, I couldn't sleep soundly, always feeling a gaze fixed on my back. When I couldn't take it anymore, I abruptly looked up and caught Doris, like a small rabbit, quickly turning around to pretend to draw. I shrugged, got up, and walked straight to Doris's desk. In front of her was a brand new, thick sketchbook. On the first page was a small chibi figure holding a dictionary, beating up a horde of distorted monsters drawn with soft pencil lines. The figure's hair, eyes, and stance looked exactly like me. I pointed at the drawing and said, half-jokingly, "Is this little chibi me?" Doris dared not look, only nodding very slightly. I let out a small, saying, "Pretty good drawing." Then I took the pencil from her desk. "Let me borrow this for a bit." I returned to my seat and looked down at the words, "Get lost, busybody," scrawled all over my desk. Without a word, I drew a few quick strokes. Another chibi figure appeared, fiercer, trampling over the filthy words. Doris peeked at my desk, then looked up at me, her previously blurry eyes now clearly lit up. The comments in my head laughed. "The artist's soul has arrived, fighting violence with violence." It was a slightly strange method, but Doris actually seemed happier. Sometimes the most vulnerable people are easiest to soothe with the most ridiculous things. After school, as I reached the gate, I saw the boys who had been punished yesterday waiting. The leader, clutching his still sore wrist, looked sullen and said, "New girl, you've got guts." I had my backpack slung over one shoulder and replied flatly, "Yeah, so?" The boys exchanged glances, spreading out to surround me. Students leaving school stepped aside, afraid of being involved. Doris, who had followed me out unnoticed, suddenly darted forward, her hands clutching her school bag strap so tightly that her knuckles were white. She was clearly terrified, but still stepped in front of me. The thugs laughed mockingly. "Well, look at the mute girl, so brave today. Trying to rely on this violent chick? Quite the pair, huh?" Doris was trembling, and I felt the fire in my chest burn even hotter. I grabbed Doris by the collar and pulled her behind me. The force was a little strong, causing Doris to stumble. I said, my voice icy, "Stand back. Don't get in the way." Doris sniffled, trying to suppress her whimpers. But a tiny, muffled cry escaped, making me even angrier. I muttered my annoyance, then turned back, focusing all my frustration on the gang. "You're such a pain, one by one or all at once." Just as the leader, Galvin, was about to rush forward, a hoarse voice rang out from behind them. "Galvin, why are you gathering the guys today? Who's bothering you? Tell me and I'll take care of them." A blond guy with a cigarette in his mouth pushed his way out. But as soon as he saw me, the cigarette dropped straight to the ground. His eyes widened and his face turned white. I immediately recognized him. Wasn't that the blond guy I had slapped twice at my old school until he couldn't find his bearings? The next second, with a sudden thump, the blond guy slammed Galvin on the head. Galvin clutched his head and yelled, "Are you crazy?" The blond boy was stammering and panicking. Don't mess with her. She's the living king of hell, the kind that plays for keeps." The whole group behind Galvin instantly turned pale. The blond boy turned around, bowed deeply toward me, and smiled placatingly. "Misunderstanding, totally a misunderstanding, sis." Then he turned and kicked Galvin, saying, "Apologize to sis now." Galvin was startled, reflexively yelling, "Misunderstanding, misunderstanding." The rest of the group also mumbled, "Misunderstanding." I crossed my arms, looked down at the blond guy, and smirked. "It's you again? Are you tired of living, or why do I keep running into you?" My reputation as a school tyrant at my old school had certainly spread far. Even in a new territory, these underlings automatically sought me out to pay their respects. It was exactly the style of a retired gangster whose legends still circulated. From that day on, I became instantly famous at the new school. Thanks to me, no one dared to touch Doris anymore. Her seat was quickly moved to a normal row, right in front of me. The bullies who used to torment Doris now avoided her, and the classroom became peaceful. But another problem began. Doris seemed to cling to me. This older sister started placing various snacks on my desk, and occasionally gave me the drawings she thought were the best, even though I couldn't understand the violent fields of color behind them. During recess, instead of shrinking into a corner, Doris would turn around and silently watch me sleep or space out. After school, Doris would pack her books slowly, waiting for me to stand up before following like a small, non-intrusive shadow. The comments in my head popped up. "Brave girl, the autistic little angel has taken her first step toward opening up." I wasn't used to it, I truly wasn't. I was used to being alone. My bipolar disorder made my emotions swing wildly. When manic, I wanted to tear down buildings, and when depressed, I didn't want to see anyone. Now, the sudden presence of a silent yet very noticeable attachment made me restless and uncomfortable. One time, I was in an extremely foul mood and Doris accidentally bumped into me. That day, Doris placed a box of chocolates on my desk. I immediately pushed it away and said, "Take that away, don't bother me." The box of chocolates flew onto the floor with a clatter, and the whole class went silent. Doris stood still, looking at the chocolate box, then at me, her lips trembling, her clear eyes quickly filling with tears. Large, silent drops fell, more devastating than loud wailing. My internal commentary whispered, "Oh, female lead, why were you so harsh? She just wanted to give you something. That's it. The tear switch is flipped." I felt my skin crawl. The anger was softened by those tear-filled eyes. I let out a sigh, bent down, picked up the chocolate box, roughly stuffed it into my desk, and said, "All right, stop crying, I accepted it, okay?" Doris slowly stopped crying, wiping her tears with the back of her hand and sniffing. The comment section erupted. "Aha! The autistic little angel's exclusive tyrant taming skill, the female lead lost completely." From then on, I understood that this sister could neither be hit nor scolded. A single harsh word could make her cry until the sky fell. I had to grudgingly endure it. I accepted whatever Doris gave me, pretended not to notice her following me, and eventually got used to her silent staring. Occasionally, when I was in a good mood, I would even condescend to comment on Doris's drawings, saying things like, "It's decent," or "The colors are bright." Or, when Doris was startled by a sudden noise, I would unconsciously lean in to shield her a little. Doris, in turn, seemed to draw immense courage from this silent acceptance. Although she was still quiet, she was no longer completely silent with me, and she even learned to smile. It was a very faint, fleeting smile, just a fragile curve at the corner of her lips, but it was like the first ray of light tearing through thick clouds, fragile, yet undeniably real. The comments in my head echoed, "Don't just stand there, take a picture. First step of the iceberg melting, all thanks to the female lead." My parents witnessed all of this. The days passed, noisy yet strained, with Doris and me strangely attached. Then Doris fell ill on that day. It was a suffocatingly gloomy weekend. My manic episode had just passed, leaving me depleted and hollow. There seemed to be some commotion downstairs. Then, a knock mixed with my mother's crying came at the door. Sandra, come quick and see Doris. Your sister, something is wrong with her." I irritably ran my hand through my hair and opened the door. My mother's face was white as a sheet and her words were jumbled. She locked herself in the art room and she's screaming and smashing things. We've called her, but she won't open the door. I dragged my slippers down to the art room. Outside the door, my father was flustered, knocking desperately. Doris, open the door! Don't scare your father! From inside came ear-piercing screams, the crash of an easel, and the sharp sound of paint jars shattering. My mother sobbed. She was fine a moment ago, just looking at an album. I stepped forward, telling my father coldly, move aside. He reflexively yielded. I raised my foot and kicked the lock hard. A loud crash echoed, shaking the door violently. My mother shrieked in terror and my father was stunned. I ignored them, kicked a second time, and the door flew open. The art room inside was a war zone. Easels were toppled, paintings ripped, paint splattered everywhere. The walls, floor, and curtains were a riot of color and chaos, like a scene of pure violence. Doris was huddled in a corner, clutching her head, her body shaking uncontrollably, making the distressed whimpers of a wounded small animal, painful and helpless. Scattered around her were several old photographs. Seeing the scene, I felt a sharp pang in my chest. I stepped over the paint and ruined frames to enter. My mother tried to follow, but I held up a hand to stop her. Let me. My mother reluctantly stopped at the doorway, watching anxiously. I walked up to Doris and sat down. Doris trembled more intensely when she felt someone approaching. I called out, Doris! My voice was so calm that it surprised even me. No annoyance, no irritation. Doris didn't react, completely submerged in her breakdown. I leaned down and saw an old photo on the floor. My parents, when they were young, holding a pale little girl wearing a jade bracelet. But it wasn't me, nor was it Doris. The comment in my head flashed, it's the female lead's real older sister, Amy? I didn't have time to think further. In front of me, Doris was hyperventilating, almost cutting off her breath. I reached out and started tapping quickly on the floor in a rhythm. The familiar sound made Doris pause slightly. I continued tapping, the rhythm steady, firm, allowing no resistance. Doris's trembling gradually lessened, but her hands were still fiercely clawing at her own arms, refusing to let go. Her fingers were clenched so tightly that they were almost bleeding. I frowned, forcefully peeling her fingers away, my voice carrying a habitual command, let go. Perhaps Doris heard a familiar tone in my voice. Her resistance decreased. I took off my jacket and roughly wrapped Doris completely in it. She was feather light, nestled in my arms no differently than a small child. I carried Doris straight out of the messy art room, took her into my room, placed her on the bed, and tucked her in. Doris was still shaking, silent tears wetting her face, her eyes vacant as she stared at the ceiling. I went to the bathroom to get a wet towel. When I returned, I was a bit rough as I wiped the paint streaks and tears off her small face. Doris didn't react, letting me do what I wanted. I sat down on the edge of the bed and continued tapping a steady rhythm on the bed frame. Gradually, Doris's breathing slowed down, becoming more stable. The comments in my head came through. The female lead really knows how to handle this, not by soothing, but by using rhythm to pull her back. This calmness is more effective than any comfort. I don't know how long I sat there. I only stopped when Doris's breaths became longer, and she finally seemed to collapse into exhausted sleep. I stood up. My mother was at the door, her hands trembling as she held a glass of water, her eyes red-rimmed. I walked out and asked in a low voice, "Who is in that photo?" My mother glanced toward the sleeping Doris, tears welling up again. She choked out, "That's Amy, Doris's older sister, and your biological sister. She was our first child, but 15 years ago she died in an accident, like..." My mother's voice broke. That year, Amy took Doris to the park to play. She slipped while trying to pick up a toy that fell into the lake. Doris was only 4 years old then and witnessed everything from the shore. Since then, she gradually stopped speaking. My father continued, his voice dry. "We took her to see doctors everywhere. Finally, the doctor concluded it was severe psychological trauma leading to post-traumatic autism. The photos in the art room are the trigger for Doris's crises. For the past 15 years, this sense of guilt has weighed heavily on her. She thinks if it weren't for her, her sister wouldn't have died. She has never forgiven herself since that day." I said nothing when they finished, only mumbling as I walked away. What does that have to do with me? Then I returned to my room, threw myself onto the bed, and covered my head with a pillow. The next morning at breakfast, Doris was nowhere to be seen. My mother, with swollen eyes, said Doris wasn't feeling well and wanted to stay in her room. After I finished eating, I went upstairs. Passing Doris's room, my steps unexpectedly stopped. For some reason, my hand automatically turned the doorknob. The room was dark, the curtains tightly drawn. Doris was curled up in a small ball under the blanket, barely visible. I walked over, dramatically yanked the curtains open. Light flooded in. Doris flinched, burrowing deeper into the blanket. I said dryly, "What's done is done. The dead can't come back. Even if you torment yourself to death, she still won't be alive." Doris's eyelashes trembled slightly. I continued, my voice still dry. "If she knew that after her death you lived like this, she'd be so angry that she'd break open her coffin and get up." The comments in my head burst out. This way of comforting is truly unique. I nudged Doris toward the bathroom door and said, "Wash your face, brush your teeth, and come down for breakfast." Doris was silent for a long time, but finally, slowly picked up the toothbrush and toothpaste. I turned my back, unsure how much Doris had heard. But that afternoon, when I walked past the art room, the door was open, and the inside was clean. Doris sat before a newly erected easel, holding a brush and staring at the white canvas, then began to draw. There were no more fields of manic color, only faint, tentative hues, gradually spreading out. I leaned against the door, watching for a while, but didn't enter. Life seemed to return to normal, but something had changed. Doris started trying to give longer answers when my mother asked questions, and even actively showed us her drawings. She even served me food at dinner, and washed the dishes herself afterward. My parents were overjoyed. Doris continued to paint, but not just in the art room, sometimes on the balcony, in the backyard, or even in the garden. Occasionally, I would swing on the hammock and see Doris sitting in the garden drawing, and I would feel a small sense of contentment. One time, I locked myself in my room, my mood hitting rock bottom. As dusk fell, Doris came and knocked. I didn't answer. Doris stood silently outside. Then a piece of paper slid under the door. I picked it up. The drawing showed two chibi figures, one with short black hair huddled in a corner with a dark cloud over her head and rain falling, the other with long white hair holding a giant sunflower umbrella shielding the first from the rain. The figure holding the umbrella even had two red streaks on her cheeks, indicating stress. I looked at the drawing for a long time. The ice-cold peace in my heart felt like someone had slipped a warm water bottle in there. I opened the door. Doris was still standing there, a little tense, and said, "Time to eat." I murmured, trying to maintain a calm voice. "What a weird painting, it's terribly drawn." Doris didn't cry, only slightly pursed her lips. It seemed Doris no longer cried easily. On graduation day, the weather was beautiful. Doris, as an outstanding art student, went on stage to present her work and give a speech. My parents were ecstatic. I leaned against the wall at the back of the auditorium. On stage, Doris wore a white dress, standing next to a colossal painting. The small cat looked a little plumper than before, with some flesh on her cheeks. Doris's painting showed two backs, one with messy short hair, the other with soft long hair, sitting together by a window. The light was soft, the colors warm and tranquil. Doris held the microphone, her voice carrying calmly through the loudspeakers. "This painting is called Sisters. Thank you. Thank you for coming into my life." Thunderous applause erupted in the auditorium. My mother wept non-stop, and my father constantly wiped his eyes. The comment section went wild. "A perfect ending. The Divine Sisters seal the deal." I turned and walked out of the noisy auditorium. The sunlight outside was glaring, falling warmly on me. I squinted, feeling that a tiny, peaceful sunflower had finally sprouted on the uneasy wild land within my heart.